Greetings, Happy New Year. Dennis Fair, retiree from the Metropolitan Police Department, was with the Metropolitan Police Department 29 years, retired June the 8th of 2019. Everything, for the most part, are my opinions, my comments are mine. Not affiliated with the Metropolitan Police Department, so anything I say is coming straight from me. I'm not trying to monetize or do anything like that with this particular information. It's just, for the most part, just trying to spread some information from a lot of questions I get. Happy New Year, first of all, again. And this topic is pretty much going to go into the situation with the Capitol, the insurrection, the attempt to overthrow the government, the terrorist attack, whatever you want to call it. It is that. You know, a lot of times I've gotten questions from family members inquiring, how could that have happened? And to a certain degree, I wondered the same thing. Was it an inside job? I've gotten those types of questions. Or did they have assistance? And some of those questions even have me wondering, is that possible? Nothing surprises me nowadays, first of all. However, I was privileged to watch this as it took place on TV, like a lot of other individuals. I did notice that these individuals started climbing the scaffolding for the stage for the inauguration. Now, normally, that's something that the Secret Service really focuses on 24/7, 365, because that's where the president will be. So you can't not keep that guarded. Once I saw these individuals climbing the scaffolding, and I didn't see Secret Service doing anything, I didn't even see them really responding. I saw Capitol Police, pretty much monitoring the situation, and of course the individuals moved from that and started to move up the Capitol steps. Now, as I noticed that, I saw a small line of officers try to form a line to block the entrance to the Capitol. Now, as that took place, they didn't have any type of riot gear or any type of gear that they should have had on for a confrontation with that type of crowd. So this was almost like, okay, what's going on? This is not going to go well, and they're outnumbered. So I'm assuming that eventually more officers will come. They didn't come. The Capitol Police were outnumbered. It's not a very, very large agency. They mostly, patrol the Capitol and do things that are affiliated like that. You're not going to see them doing a whole lot of traffic stops. They're not going to be responding to everyday calls for service like the Metropolitan Police Department. So a lot of times they're not trained to deal with that type of situation on a regular basis. However, they do have enough training to know that obviously in a situation like that, you're going to need to call for backup. Now, whether they call for backup, I don't know what they did. But I do know with the situation with the Metropolitan Police Department, it was said that one of the Special Operations Division commanders called call for service, that he needed emergency call for service. They needed more backup, and it didn't show up. Now, I was with the Metropolitan Police Department 29 years. For backup not to show up is unheard of, because there are agencies that surround Washington, D.C. that will come from anywhere to assist. So it's a little suspect of why that they didn't get backup. And it's a lot that doesn't add up. It's a whole lot that doesn't add up. I did notice that when the Capitol, the police people in the Capitol, that Capitol Police seemed like they were just unprepared, scared. Some of them didn't take it seriously at all, because I saw individuals laughing, taking selfies. And that's another situation that I don't believe Capitol Police took it seriously. I don't know if it was because they were Trump supporters, and a lot of them were affiliated and possibly Trump supporters as well. Doesn't make a difference whether you support Trump or not. In that situation, you got a job to do. They have just broken the law, entered the Capitol. Smiling and taking selfies is not professional, and it's pretty much, in a sense, you're actually contributing to the situation. Why would you want to take a picture with an individual that's just violated and went into the Capitol unlawfully? But some of these individuals should not have even been on the department. Obviously, if the first thing you're thinking of, if an individual wants to take a picture with you, you're going to take a picture after they enter the Capitol unlawfully. Would you have took a picture with the individual that burglarized a home, and then as he's coming out, he wants to take a picture? You wouldn't do it then. Why would you do it now? A lot of the Capitol Police didn't take it seriously. You can see it in their faces. A lot of them were laughing. Even when the individuals were being escorted out, no one attempted to make an arrest. No one attempted to, like, look, they in here now. Let's guard these doors. Let's seal these doors off. And everybody's going to catch a charge. That didn't happen. They allowed them to walk out. They held the door for them. It was a whole lot of bizarre things that went on that I really don't have the answers to. I will say this. This is my opinion. If they were Black Lives Matter individuals, which to me, it shouldn't make a difference, I don't think they would have did that. I don't think they would have took it that light. I think a lot of times individuals sometimes can go light and be a little more lackadaisical if the individuals look like them or if the individuals had the same thought process as them. My thing is, it doesn't matter. You're there to do a job. Whether it's a person that's with the same political organization that you are, if it's a crime committed, you got to do your job. You can't sit around and side or give them the benefit of the doubt or pat them on the back and hold the door for them as they're leaving. That was bizarre. Now, granted, a lot of these individuals that did enter the Capitol unlawfully, they didn't really get charged. A lot of them got probation. A few of them obviously got some time behind it, but for the most part, the majority of them it was like a thing. Hey, we didn't realize it. I blame Trump. No, you're a grown adult. Some of these individuals were law enforcement. Some of these individuals with the fire department. Some of these individuals with the military. Some of these people were actors. It's a lot of people that went in that Capitol that you have no knowledge of that were who they are. They had very, very prestigious jobs in life, and they still went in. You can't take it away and blame Trump for your actions. That's crazy. Trump mentioned something about, I believe, bleach, drinking bleach or something like that. I had enough common sense. They had to, I believe, reissue a statement saying, whatever you do, don't drink bleach. Because some individuals were that foolish enough to listen to what he said and drink the bleach. So they had to almost do a disclosure. Oh, by the way, don't really do this. He doesn't mean it like that. It's just sarcasm. Because individuals are so stupid that they'll actually drink the bleach. But that's something on a whole nother topic. But the individuals that entered this Capitol, a lot of them were law enforcement. And that's pathetic. I did see a retiree that I worked with somebody took a picture and sent it to me. He wasn't in the Capitol to my knowledge, but he was down there. And to each his own. You got a right to go down there and support if that's what you want to do. If you can do that. This is America. But when you start doing illegal things like entering the Capitol unlawfully, that's a whole nother situation. And with the Capitol Police weren't really staffed properly. They didn't have the manpower. And you could see it. Of course, the Metropolitan Police Department did eventually show up. And that didn't really help a whole lot. You saw officers, I believe one officer was screaming. He was getting crushed in the door. I don't really understand the logic in that, because if you're an officer getting crushed in the door and you have your fellow officers, at that point, you do whatever you can to save that officer. And if you can't get him out of that door and they'll continue to crush, at that point, as unfortunate as this is going to be, you're going to have to draw your service weapon and fire a shot at one of those individuals that's crushing that door, that's crushing that officer. That's a life or death situation. A lot of people be like, oh, no, you just can't do that. Well, the officer can't just lose his life. That's what you're trained to do. Now, obviously, if you can't mace him or if you can't use a strike with the baton, then what are you supposed to do? Obviously, the tasers you probably can't use a taser. You have to do something. But versus allowing this officer to scream for his life being crushed in the door. There's another officer from MPD that supposedly, allegedly, and I say allegedly because the story to me, and this is just my opinion, sounds a little suspect. This individual was allegedly kidnapped. This is MPD officer I'm referring to. Kidnapped, tased, knocked out for 4 minutes, and I believe he had a heart attack. What else did he say he did? It was quite a few things. And somehow they brought him back and allowed him or brought him back to the front after they did this without taking his weapon. Supposedly they took his badge, they took his radio and buried it in a yard or something, but didn't take his gun. It's me personally. That doesn't add up to me. Now I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I'm damn sure saying I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I'm not saying it did either. I'm damn sure not saying it did happen because it just doesn't add up. You know, the Metropolitan Police Department hasn't even acknowledged him. Now, he's been on CNN. He's made his circuit around with the media, but the Metropolitan Police Department has not honored him or any of those officers that brought this. They're bringing a lawsuit against Trump, and they've testified. A few MPD officers and some of the Capitol Police have testified before Congress on their experience on how traumatizing it was. Now, this particular incident, January the 6th, 21, was one day. It wasn't even 24 hours. I worked in Mount Pleasant Rides. That went like a week. I couldn't possibly think of quitting. I couldn't possibly think of the mental anguish that they say they're now going through. I think one of the officers says he hears ringing in his ears, insomnia, he can no longer sleep. What else did they say? Mental. They're bringing all types of scenarios in the legal case against Trump. Picture that. You suing Trump. Now, I'm sure he has a lot of financial resources when it comes down to legal situations like that. So he could play that game forever. Now, I think one officer, from Capitol wants maybe $75,000. That's legal fees. That's possibly legal fees, and that's not even close. A lot of times legal fees might add up to that. That's what the attorneys a lot of times are. That's just legal fees, not including anything else. I just personally don't get that part. You know, you knew the job was dangerous when you took it. You do know that this is not a computer job or administrative job where you sit behind a desk where, you know, the worst thing you might do, you might send an email to too many people, you CC too many people. So you screwed up because you already put send. So you got to deal with the consequences. In law enforcement, when you make a mistake, it might cost you your life. You might not come home. You know, something simple as a burglar alarm. You get a call for a burglar alarm, but guess what? You're not going to wait for your backup. It's a call you get periodically, so you get out the car and go check it. But this time, it's really 3, 4, 5 armed gunmen inside burglarizing the spot. You take it upon yourself. You see the doors open. You go in, and as you peep your head in, you get your head blown off. Guess what? They give your wife or your loved one a nice crispy flag. A lot of times they'll drape the police car down with black ribbons and all that stuff. And 24 hours later, guess what? They take that car from in front of the station, they put it back in service, and somebody else is driving that car, and they move forward. That's just the harsh reality of it. Law enforcement is not pretty. So when you talking about you going to sue, imagine all the incidents I've had in 29 years, the fights, the large crowds, the ride to Mount Pleasant, you know, the bricks thrown at us, the bus, the bus on the way down there, you know, you getting all this. Imagine me suing the community of Mount Pleasant or suing the promoters of that had Ray Estes or Chuck Brown there when we had the large fights. Yeah, you got injured. So what? That's part of life. That's part of the occupation. You gonna get hurt. You know, it's not a clean game. You get hurt. You have to go hands on at times. It's not all just jumping around and dancing like they would like you to think that that's what goes on. And law enforcement is not pretty. You know, of course they'll they're trying to bring forth people to encourage them to join, but it's totally different from what you see in the little videos. The kid jumps up, he says he wants to be a Metropolitan Police Department. That sounds good and all, but it's a whole lot to it that they won't show. And that the Capitol police officer put you in the mindset of Shaquille O'Neal. One individual, I believe he looks like he's almost 7 foot, and I watched him testify, in reference to how traumatic it was. I think he said he had never been called some of the racial slurs, and I believe he was called a nigger. So he really was bent out of shape, and he said he had never been called that before. Well, he's delusional. And a lot of people are like, oh man, that's insensitive for you to say. Now, he's delusional because he's been called a nigger. If he's black, he's been called a nigger. And I said it to a lot of individuals that I spoke with, he was been called a nigger. He just didn't hear him call him that. And he might have been called a nigger by some of his own coworkers. That's just the reality of it. To sit there and break down in tears, testifying before Congress. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a man crying, and, you're human, but that's traumatic. A name. You broke down because you were called a name. Now, if you would break down over something like that, what are you going to do in a real situation? Because that's just a word, And I think one of the dudes, the MPD officer, they showed the video of him supposedly, and I'm saying supposedly because to me it just doesn't add up, and I don't have a problem saying it. That's just my opinion. It doesn't add up how an armed, uniformed officer can get kidnapped and taken into a crowd and supposedly beat, knocked out for 4 minutes, tased, supposedly he had a heart attack, and they see him, he's screaming on video, I have a wife and kids. That's the first thing that came to your mind when you're in that situation. That's a life and death situation. You have a service weapon. You have 2 magazines in case you run out of one, if you have to utilize deadly force. But the first thing you are doing is screaming, I have a wife and kids. That didn't make sense to me. And in my opinion, I'm thankful, and this is harsh, but I'm thankful that I never had to work with him. But you didn't think that maybe this is the time to use your service weapon because you might die. If they get a hold of your weapon, you're going to die. But you're screaming you got a wife and kids. Should have never been on the department. I don't know where this individual worked before. I didn't really do the research. I don't know what type of history he has. I don't know what type of officer he was, but I know he's on video screaming, I have a wife and kids. Now, how he got into that crowd by himself from a CDU platoon of officers is beyond me. Now I've seen the little post that he's a hero, and to me, he's not a hero. To me, I'd like to know how he got into that crowd alone. Did he not follow procedures? Did he do something wrong? Was he even scheduled to work that day? There's a whole lot of answers to that just haven't been answered. This individual says he was kidnapped. You're an armed MPD officer and you were kidnapped? And I have yet to see Chief Conti get on the news or award this individual anything. That's mighty funny. They haven't awarded this individual anything. And I've seen MPD give awards for officers that, in my opinion, didn't deserve jack, but they do it. So this here is a little suspect. There was another Capitol Police officer, I believe. He's crying. I guess the crying thing, teach his own, but I guess that made it look a little more believable as they were testifying before Congress. This guy said, and I've never been in the military, but I have relatives that have. This individual said that it was worse than anything he experienced in combat in the military. Now, I don't know what kind of military combat he was in for less than 24 hours to be something that traumatized him that much, but I can't see that incident being more traumatic than combat in the military, but he said it was. So maybe his combat was simulated in a video game, or he wasn't actually in the field. I don't know. It's a new generation of military. It's a new generation of law enforcement officers. I have spoken with some individuals that are in the military. Military training is not as harsh as it was. Neither is the police academy. It's not as real as it was because no one wants to offend anyone. So they somewhat stay away from reality. They don't have realistic scenarios where you have a large crowd or some individual calling you out of your name because it's not politically correct. Like now, you can't address the new officers. This was before I left. You can't address the new officers as rookies because that's not professionally right. It's something that they're watering down the academy. You can't really treat the new officers in a certain kind of way. You almost have to cater to them. And it just makes them softer. And this is what you get. You get individuals that have been in a situation that's part of their job. Now, it's part of your job to go to the Capitol if this type of situation happens. This is part of your job. It's not part of your job to bring a legal lawsuit for doing your job. Of course, it was going to be traumatic. Going to a run and seeing a dead baby is traumatic. But I can't sue the mother of the dead baby for killing the baby. I'm still a police officer. That's part of my job. As crazy as it is, I have to stay there on the scene with that dead baby until the medical examiner gets there. There's no break or, hey, man, can I time out, man? I can't take this no more. Sarge, is there any way I can get the remainder off? It doesn't work like that. No, you stand there with that dead baby. And that's going to be in your mind for a while, especially if that's your first encounter with a situation like that. See, they're not going to show that on TV. Chief Conti and all the political little things they do to mayor, they're not going to tell you that that's the reality of being in law enforcement. And guess what? When the medical examiner does come and they clear the scene, you go back in service, you get another call for service. Now you got a call for domestic violence in progress. You get there, somebody's face is split open. You got to find out who the aggressor is, possibly make the arrest, still maintain your safety and not get killed in the process of that. Bottom line is, there's no timeout. There's no break. Your only break is the assignment that you want. And once you get off that assignment, normally, depending on how busy the district is, you're going to get another one as soon as you clear. Because they're holding runs pretty much, some are pending. That means they don't have enough officers to take the assignment. So as soon as you tell the dispatcher, clear me of the scene in reference to the baby. You're not going to say the dead baby, but clear me in reference to whatever the address where the homicide of the baby was. Guess what? Dispatcher had a unit respond and so on, so we got a domestic violence in progress, females bleeding profusely from the head. Guess what? You go into that. There's no breaks. So to see these officers, it's funny, but it's not funny, and maybe I'm just insensitive. Maybe I come from a different era of law enforcement. I came on in the 90s. It was a little different. There was no catering. If you were new, you were new. You got every screwed up detail. You got every screwed up assignment. If there was a hospital detail where there was a prisoner that had been in the hospital for a week, guess what? The new officers got it. There wasn't any break or situation where, well, I had it last night. Is any way that, you had it last night, you wouldn't even think to ask nothing like that. You're going to have it until the detail is over. You're the newest man on the totem pole. So guess what? You get the detail every night. And that's what happened. I didn't do anything. I took the detail. What was I supposed to do? File a complaint? A lot of these new officers will file a complaint or try to say that they're just getting the detail because they're female, or they just giving me the detail because I'm this or that. Man, that's just... It's a new era of law enforcement, and that's why the things are the way they are in the streets of Washington, D.C. And again, that's a whole nother story that I'll eventually go into that as well. But back to the officers that have brought a legal case against Trump. First of all, Trump's finances, he can keep going with this lawsuit. This will go forever. And he probably is not even made aware of it. That's how pointless it is. He probably doesn't even know. Somebody from his... legal team is probably monitoring it, but that's not even a concern of his. He's getting ready to run again. And honestly, in 24, if it's no one other than Biden, it's a good chance he's going to come back. Do I want to see him come back? I don't. Do I want to see Biden come back? I don't. So who else is there right now? I don't see anyone else. But on the same note, Trump is the type of individual, and this is totally off the subject, but I'm going to say this. Trump speaks for the most part, his mind. He says exactly what's on his mind. Even if it's something stupid or ignorant, you know where he's coming from. He's not going to really, for the most part, pretend that he likes you. It's just, if he doesn't like you, you'll know it. And he'll say whatever comes to his mind. And most people don't do that. Most people want to do it, but they don't, or they just don't have a heart, or depending on their profession, they just can't do it. So a lot of people live through Trump. A lot of people, to a lot of people, Trump is their hero. It's like, man, I wish I could say some of this stuff, or I do some of this stuff. Yeah, he's got money, he's got the finances, so he gets away with a lot of things that the average person can't get away with. But to see these officers, and honestly, that particular day was an embarrassment in law enforcement, period. MPD, Capitol Police, it was an embarrassment. Because I've seen the Metropolitan Police Department, for example, doing Howard's homecoming, Howard University. They used to have large parties. And I mean, every celebrity that you could think of would come to these parties. And a lot of times, it would be parties that were at hotels that were overcrowded. I remember one particular party, I believe it was at one of the Hiltons in the 3rd District one year. It got out of hand. They had a large fight. 3D couldn't handle it, so they called citywide emergency call for service. Now, when I mean citywide, that means that they're calling for assistance from every district in the Metropolitan Police Department. That means 1D, 2D, 3D, 4D, all 7 districts are coming to that call because it's out of hand. The dispatcher came over there and said every unit respond to that location. The whole city, the whole Metropolitan Police Department respond. It was so many police cars that you really couldn't even get to the hotel. You had to park like outside of the perimeter because all the police cars from every district were all over the place. And it took us almost 30 minutes to, when it was finally resolved, to even get away from the area. That's how many police it was. That's why I say to myself, when they say a commander from Special Operations Division, say he from MPD called a nationwide call, citywide, he called for 1033, which is he needs assistance. Nobody responded. That is suspect, because I've never been in a situation where a commander or anyone for that nature called for assistance and nobody responded. He said that he made the call numerous times and no one responded. Something isn't right about that situation. They said the military was on standby, but no one gave him the call to come in and assist Capitol Police. Something about that is a little suspect. And again, the individuals that for Capitol and it's some other officers that are bringing this case. I think insomnia, mental stress. What else? One else is, I think his hearing is off because of the flashbangs. I don't even know if he's saying that the protesters used them. I don't know if the department used them or what, but how do you bring a legal case against, basically, you took an oath to be involved in that type of stuff? You know, now I get taking a legal case if you're working in a district and there's asbestos in the, or some type of situation like that, there's some type of chemical in the district that obviously you didn't sign up for that. But the situation with the Capitol is part of the job. That was one day. The Mount Pleasant riots that I worked for, well, that kicked off for a whole week. We didn't go home, you know, for the most part. We went home and we were right back at work. You know, it was cool a lot of times during the day, but once the night hit, the bricks started coming. You know what I'm saying? A lot of officers got hit with bricks. I mean, all types of things happen. But it never crossed my mind to bring a case, a legal case against the mayor or the citizens of Mount Pleasant. It's just part of the job, I thought. But maybe, like I said, it's a new generation of police. They built a little different. But to think of a legal case or quitting. I mean, over time, that's the first time I saw we worked. I can't even think of how many hours. But one of my checks was $5,000 after taxes. That's how many hours we spent there in Mount Pleasant. I was in disbelief. I mean, I was just, it was like I hit lotto. I didn't think it was right. And then we start, other officers started talking about what they had got on their check. And we was like comparing stubs, and we were talking about what we are going to do with the money. Oh man, I can't believe this. $5,000? To a lot of people, obviously that's not a lot of money. But back in the 90s, $5,000 every 2 weeks, and to this day, it's pretty much a lot of money. $5,000, and I came on in the 90s. I think the Mount Pleasant ride was 93. I got 3 years on the department, and every 2 weeks doing the Mount Pleasant rides, of course, I'm bringing $5,000 after taxes. I felt like the king of the world. Yeah, okay, so we fought at nighttime. The bricks came. Gas. Yeah, so what? I dealt with it. But these officers are going to bring a legal case, and a lot of them are traumatized. The big guy for Capitol Police, I think he put your mindset of Shaquille O'Neal. Like I said, he says he had so traumatized, he had racial slurs, and they called him a nigger. He said he had never. No, you've been called a nigger, you just never heard it. Some of your own coworkers probably called you a nigger. You just, obviously, they're not going to call you that to your face, but you'd be surprised what people do behind closed doors. But for whatever reason, he was traumatized behind. I'm like, man, that's hard to believe. This 7-foot guy should have been throwing some of them protesters back in the crowd. But sometimes size doesn't matter. But in this particular case, another individual, MPD, saw him screaming in the door, which I didn't understand. The other officers, were they near him or what have you. If he's screaming and he's getting crushed in the door screaming like that, and you got protesters adjusting his helmet and things like that, at that point, that's possibly a life and death situation where somebody's going to have to make a decision to either draw that service weapon and fire that shot. You have to do what you got to do. This officer's life is worth more than seeing him get killed by these protesters. You have to do what you have to do. And again, the individual that was supposedly kidnapped and taken into the crowd, MPD officer, I'm still not understanding how that took place, but I did see the video where he's screaming, I have a wife and kids. I don't know what part of the training that was. In that particular case, that's a life and death situation where you don't have a choice but to fire your weapon. Now, somehow they returned him back with his weapon. I think they pulled his badge off and his radio, and somehow was found buried in someone's yard or whatever. I don't know how they managed to track that radio down. I guess it was some Dionne Warwick psychic friends hotline. Maybe that's how they found it. But the bottom line is, it just doesn't add up. It doesn't add up at all. This individual that supposedly the one that was screaming, I have a wife and kids, that's the first thing that came to his mind. I don't teach his own, but that's the time. At that point, you have to use deadly force. You got to get that service weapon out, and you're going to have to fire it. Now, someone is likely possibly going to die, and one of those protesters might have died, but that's an unfortunate part of law enforcement when you're in that situation. Now, this individual, to my knowledge, has quit. It's been so traumatizing, they just couldn't take it no more. He quit. Although the riots are over, the Capitol situation ride, whatever you want to call it, terrorist attack, it was less than 24 hours. That's over. But that one day was so traumatic that he had to quit. And supposedly, he's trying to be a respondent for CNN. I don't really know what he could possibly really add to, other than he got beat down, if that's really what happened. Because I have yet to see Chief Conte award him with anything. I have yet to see the city of Washington, D.C. acknowledge him. I didn't see the mayor proclaim it, a certain day for him or for those officers. I didn't see none of that happen yet. And it's probably not going to happen. These officers are paid to endure that type of treatment. That's what you get paid for. There's no break or no time out in law enforcement. This is what you have to go through. Yeah, you might go to one call and Guess what? It's kicking off. They've locked up somebody in the neighborhood. So guess what? The whole neighborhood is coming out to fight. Guess what? You can't call timeout and go home. Hey, Sarge, can I have the remainder of the shift off? Nah, you got to deal with it. I'm not saying go out there and harass people or start stuff, but if people bring violence, then unfortunately you got to be violent as well, and you have to defend yourself within reason. Obviously, you can't or you shouldn't, although it's been done, you shouldn't put your knee on someone's neck until basically they're dead. That's not acceptable. But to do the job, and you have to put your hands on someone to defend yourself, it's totally acceptable. Now, obviously, you can't go beyond the scope. The individual's handcuffed, so you still gonna beat him? Come on, man, that can't happen. But these officers traumatized. Like I said, the officers just to hear the testimony, I had to think. I said, wait a minute. After watching the testimony and them crying and these things happening, I'm like, this is unreal. Why are these officers crying? And this wasn't even 24 hours. I worked all types of situations, and like I said, it's a little suspect from the officers that took pictures, selfies. They were smiling. They didn't take it seriously. I saw a lot of officers smiling from Capitol that made me think, was this a setup? Did they know about it? Because I don't think that they would have done the same had it been Black Lives Matter. I think their particular, they're considered more threatening. For whatever reason, and this is just my opinion, a lot of those Capitol Police officers identified with them. So to them, it wasn't a big deal. Hey, they just goofing off, You escorting these people out and holding the door, laughing and talking after these individuals have just unlawfully entered the Capitol. What should have been done is a perimeter set, and everybody that was in there should have been arrested. But that didn't happen. They allowed everybody to walk away, and then the FBI supposedly, has to search around and pull video footage and steal screenshots and all that, and try to put out rewards for these individuals when you had the individuals in the Capitol. It's bizarre. I don't have a lot of answers to it. I do think some of those incidents were suspect. I do. I just still find it hard to believe an officer in full uniform was kidnapped and taken into a crowd and then returned. It's just some of that just doesn't add up. And even like I said, the police department is not even acknowledging that even took place. Of course, he's quick. He's trying to get on CNN as a respondent. I don't know what for. Basically, how not to do the job properly, how not to follow procedures, because he clearly didn't follow some procedures. But that's a whole nother lengthy topic. But this is the law enforcement we have now. It's different. I personally would have never thought of bringing a legal case against club owners or promoters for being in incidents where I might have gotten injured. That's part of the game. But it's different law enforcement now. These individuals are not cut from the same cloth, and that's one of the problems you have in law enforcement today. But I do believe that more happened that's being publicized. I don't think these individuals are just randomly. I think it was a little more inside job. I can't really say necessarily how, but some Capitol Police have been disciplined for giving a heads up, and you could see it in the video. I mean, I've been in all types of situations, but it's no situation where I want to take selfies with individuals that had just broken the law. And even if they hadn't, you're there to do a job. You're not there to be fans of these individuals, even if that's your political affiliation. Do your job as a law enforcement officer and don't be biased. But hey, that's just my take on it. Different law enforcement agencies nowadays. Like I said, I get the whole Me Too movement, but police too? Come on, man. You shouldn't even took the oath if you were going to do this. Legal cases, testifying, crying, They cut from a different cloth. Not my era, of course, and I'm thankful that I didn't have to work with neither one of them. None of them. And like I said, to a lot of people, that's harsh. Oh man, I can't believe you said. But again, these are my opinions. I'm not affiliated. I'm not monetized. And none of this. I'm not doing this for money. I don't. I just do it to put my opinion and voice my comments. But total different generation of law enforcement, and it's gonna get a whole lot worse. I'm out.